Hi, guys. Welcome to the Church Split Reviews, where you get a Christian perspective on the latest TV shows, movies, video games, or whatever it is I feel like talking about at the time. Today, we're talking about episode 2 of The Last of Us. It just dropped tonight. Whatever you watch this, it might be a day or two afterwards. But what I'm doing is I'm basically watching the show, putting my thoughts together right before I do this, just recording it. So I know some of you might be looking for our theology content, which is our more popular content, which is actually the main intent of this channel. But also the reviews allow me to talk about things I love, things I enjoy, and also they're easier to do without all this preparation. However, I do have a live stream that I am planning on doing here this week for a theology thing / Narnia / Christian theology, whatever. So anyway, keep an eye out for that. It'll be a good time. But anyway, this is talking about The Last of Us episode 2 on HBO. So if you guys aren't watching it, I guess you don't really care about this. But those of you who are watching this, I would like to just kind of share my thoughts here for a minute. So episode 2 continues right where the other one left off, right when Joel, Ellie, and Tess all went into the city of Boston. Now, if you play the game, I knew this was the next step. It was really cool that they're so far being pretty faithful. Now, the only gripe I have so far, now last time I went on a whole gripe about the age and like the whole casting situation with Sarah, Joel's daughter. But in this one, my only gripe is what I have discovered, how they're kind of going about the cordyceps, like the fungus itself. They've added some things to it, and then they removed some things from it. So those of you guys who do not know, again, The Last of Us based on a very popular video game, and same with the sequel. There's a Last of Us and The Last of Us 2, and this show is, of course, based on the wild success of the video game. And, of course, the idea of the cordyceps being the fungus that basically create the new zombies. But the thing is, with this infected, in the games, see, cordyceps in real life are a fungus that have spores that infect ants and basically mind control ants to infect more ants to keep growing the fungus, okay? And so the whole idea is that that's now is able to enter humans. Now, the problem is with this is that they're kind of getting rid, they've mentioned spores, but they kind of got rid of that. And if you actually, so they actually talked about this, directors did. Alex, a fan of the channel, he actually was the one who pointed me in the direction out that they actually kind of got rid of this aspect from the game, which I think is to the show's detriment, because the idea in the game was that there are spores that could still infect you. So depending on if you're in an enclosed area and there's some infected that eventually decayed to the point of being overgrown by the fungus, one with the wall, then they start sporing. And when they start sporing, the whole area becomes contaminated. And if you breathe it in, you're infected too. So in the game, if you got into such an area, or they knew there would be such an area, they would put their gas masks on so that way they couldn't be infected. It was even scarier because it felt like the very air could kill you. Now, apparently the directors and creative team said that they got rid of that aspect because essentially it'd be too hard to try to implement that into a show where people wouldn't be like, okay, yeah, but wouldn't everyone get infected if the wind carries these spores? So they're just like, look, that's a giant plot hole. We're not going to use that. But I feel like you could just explain away the plot hole by saying like it's only potent for a certain period of time, so it can't travel very far, but it's just only very potent in this area, or that's why they do that. They always go inside, and that's why. And outside of the sun is when they really do this. I don't know, whatever. There could have been a number of ways they explained it, which is why it only happens inside in cramped spaces, or it only is so potent within a short range. Whatever. There's certain things they could have done to kept that, because that was actually a big plot point, because this episode did what I was kind of hoping that they would do at the end of the last one, but they ended up doing it in this one, so it worked out, which was in the game when Ellie's shown to have been bitten, that is a huge moment, and Joel's just like, okay, time to smoke her. She's done. We're gonna murk this girl right now, end it. And it was a lot more of a bigger moment in the game, and so in this they actually explore that a little bit, and I liked that. So she, of course, is infected, but not infected. She actually is bit, so she's immune. And so you see Joel's like tentativeness with her, and I did enjoy that aspect of it, because they explored that where it's like, hey, yeah, this is not normal for someone to be immune, and so he is just waiting for her to go wrong. And this is where I also think the girl who plays Ellie, she shines through in this episode. Last time she did not get much much screen time. This episode, she gets a lot more screen time. You get a lot more of who Ellie is. And I think she's doing a really good job because Ellie, she uses, very mature language, but she's still a kid. So you see her like as a teenager, like goofing off in the hotel in this one, and she did that in the game too, where she like mess around and do random games in the background and banter with Joel and them. I thought that was cool. Now Tess in this iteration is a little bit more hardcore than she was in the game. Like I feel like she's got a little bit more of a rough edge in the show, but of course, spoiler warning, in this show at the end she dies, and she does die in the game, but they changed the way she died. And actually this kind of goes into one of those things where I'm like, I kind of like it, I kind of don't, but mainly because I'm always just like, I want it to be always exactly like the thing I love, like the video game or the comic book. But they changed it to where now the cordyceps also like are veins that go through the city, and they, by stepping on one or doing something to one body, it can kind of pick up this root that sends a signal to other infected, and then they all come that way because they all know now where you are. I don't remember that ever being in the game, but if that's an added thing, let me know if that was or was not, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't in the games. Remember, I wasn't as hardcore into it as everyone else. I just really enjoyed them, but I wasn't like obsessed like some people. So I thought that was really interesting. I didn't hate that. I was just like, oh, so we got rid of spores, but we added that, but I feel like we should have still kept the spores. And then the other thing that they added was, of course, that like the fungus almost coming out of their mouth. So when it kills Tess, it like French kisses her. That was weird. I was like, I don't know how I feel about this either, but at the same time, it was creepy, and that's kind of the point of the infected, is to be a little creepy. So, I mean, whatever, I was here for it. But the biggest thing is I really wish they would have kept the spores, because that's a huge plot point as the games go on in the narrative, because Ellie has to try to blend in. Even though Ellie is immune, she has to try to blend in. Otherwise, people might want her for their own purposes. So she wears gas masks even though she doesn't need to. But in the second game, she uses that to her advantage by trying to get away from some people, and she'll run into an area covered in spores and take off her mask and just absolutely go to town. And it shocks people when they see her without a mask, and then she gets like kind of the over under on them, right? So she uses it to her advantage, and so I liked that, and I feel like that they kind of got rid of that in this. So this part follows a part of the game where they go through the museum as they're making their way to the fireflies, and they change some of it the way it goes, but it does the job effectively. I mean, again, in a TV show, they're not going to do everything the way the video game does. You're not going to be able to do that. Video games are like 15, 20, 30 hours to beat, and this is going to be a certain amount of episodes show. So the question for me is, are they going to capture the same vibe that I want them to capture? And in my experience, yes, minus the spores issue that the air could kill you, which was awesome. In fact, even like the loading screen in The Last of Us is the spores going across the screen. So it's like a big element in the game. So it's weird that they don't have that. But in every other way, they're capturing that, and the infection looks disgusting as it's spreading. They show like the corruption on the walls, the body's overgrown by fungus and dried up, and some of them are still a little moist, yummy. And then they have the clickers, and I know that so everyone's probably wondering. And for those who do not know, there are infected that the fungus has overgrown so much it's grown over their face and they cannot see, so they use echolocation by clicking their tongue, hence clickers. And they're so creepy, and that was a really great part of this show. I actually really enjoyed that entire scene, super intense. Brian, my co-host, he was texting me throughout. We were both watching it at our own respective homes, and he was like, "This is so intense." He never played the game, and I was like, "I know, this is so good." So the clickers, oh my goodness, whoever is doing the special effects in this show crushed it. They're doing such a good job. I love it. It shows that practical effects go a long way, not just CGI and everything, but if you use practical effects, it always looks better than CGI. So good. So as a Christian, though, I do feel like I do need to give you guys a disclaimer. I have already mentioned this is kind of like a mature show, but at the very beginning of this episode actually does open up with a really actually fascinating scene, because it's going back in time when the cordyceps infection first started. And she's going, hey, this is a fungus, essentially, this doctor. She's like, there's no way to cure this thing, so you're going to bomb the city. So I'm going to go to my family, do what you must, but basically we're screwed. And that was cool, but the for that, the way they got there was a body that she had to do an autopsy on, essentially, and that looked like it was infected with cordyceps, and that's when she realized that it's in the body that this fungus is growing, and it's a nude body. Like, it shows quite a bit of this woman who is on the cutting table floor. So I shouldn't have been surprised, because HBO, they're kind of known for doing that, even though that wasn't in the game. So just as a heads up, if you want to skip through that, that's fine. Basically, all they find out in this area is that she's infected, that the infection is real, and so she's scared. So if you get to that part, you just go ahead and skip through it, and if then you're good. But I watch this, so you don't have to. Or you can get VidAngel, but VidAngel probably hasn't filtered this yet. But by the way, VidAngel is really solid for those of you who want to make sure that you never have to deal with that sort of nonsense. It actually is pretty slick the way they have it set up, as long as their shows are filtered, and it takes them a while to work ahead. But anyway, so this episode was solid. That's all I really have to say. It was really good. I am so far absolutely loving this show. Remember, I said this is a P of perseverance of the Saints. Let's see if they make it through. So far, the show is actually doing an amazing job. They have Ellie, right? She's goofy, she's funny, she's likable, she's snarky, she's super sarcastic. Joel's the same way. He's very on edge with her. We see more of I feel like an edgy Tess at the beginning, but then you see her heart come through, which kind of happens in the game too, but I feel like this one she's a little bit more hardcore. Maybe I'm wrong, but you tell me. I'm playing through the game. I've been playing through the game recently because the show's out. I'm like, I want to compare them. I want to refresh my memory. So anyway, this show's doing an amazing job. If this is actually for all Witcher and all these other shows that Netflix is doing, that it keeps abandoning the actual source material, this show should be a testament so far up to episode 2 of what happens when you're pretty faithful to the source material, how happy people will be. Period. People are going to love that. Because, again, people want to see what they loved on screen. So even though I have minor gripes, age of Sarah, the casting of Sarah in general, and then you have the getting rid of the spores idea, not really in love with that. But outside of that, it's like everything else is a 10 out of 10. So it's hard to make those areas are like minor quibbles in the face of everything else. And again, maybe people are okay with this, are not like me, where they wish that they're fine with the spores and they really like this idea of the cordyceps having roots that reach far away that kind of communicate with each other. Maybe you like that better. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts down below. But the only thing I have to say, again, to talk about the spores, because it's another weird plot hole. I don't understand, though, then how they would explain cordyceps, since that's literally the spores is how they go about it. But you see them growing, like the cordyceps growing out of the bodies up to the sun, and usually in real cordyceps, they get to this point where they mature and then the spores drop. So I'm like, well, what's the point of the fungus growing if there's no spores that people can get infected with? Unless that's what they were hinting at when he was outside of the museum and he's like, it's dried up, so maybe they're dried up in there too? Maybe? I don't know. I'm curious at what they're going to do with this. So anyway, guys, The Last of Us so far, right now, crushing it. Absolutely doing an amazing job. And I am really excited now for every single week, because now you did great two weeks in a row. I'm excited to see where the series goes. So you guys let me know what you think about this show down below. And like always, guys, just stick around. We got more things coming your way. And look out for that live stream coming for you this week, where we're going to talk about a Guardian article from a very liberal person who ran for some very liberal offices, who wrote about Chronicles of Narnia when the movie came out in 2005. And the reason why I'm going to talk about that is because Netflix has bought the rights to Chronicles of Narnia. And if you know anything about Netflix, they have such a 50-50 shot on whether or not any of their stuff is good. So keep an eye out on that, because this Guardian article is a bit of a doozy on her view of Narnia and Christianity. So anyhow, guys, this has been The Church Split. I'm going to sign off here. Let me know what you think of episode 2. Take care, and God bless.